is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsey Cortes, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete.
Hello, fans and listeners. It's Lindsey Cortes, registered dietitian, sports dietitian, and your host of the podcast. Today, our guest is Georgia Cass. She is a strength and conditioning coach, performance coach, and founder of Lift Her Strength. She has been working with female athletes for over 7 years, and over the last 2 years specifically, she has shifted her focus to working with female rugby players. You can find her on Instagram at lifther_strength and TikTok at liftherstrength. And we're really excited to talk about her experiences working specifically with female athletes, strength and conditioning, and again, the sport of rugby, which I don't believe that I've talked about on this podcast because in all transparency, I have zero experience with rugby players. It's not too common of a sport here over here in the USA, although the Olympic team in 2024 certainly with their podium win made a big difference, I think, in the sport for U.S. fans and players, but certainly more of a common sport over in the U.K., which is where Georgia is. So, thank you all for joining, Georgia. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes. So let's get right into kind of your journey to becoming a strength and conditioning coach. Where did kind of your passion stem from? Were you a rugby player yourself? Was sports always part of your life? How did that become, kind of where you professionally led your career?
I mean, it's quite a conventional and kind of convoluted journey for me, actually. I actually hated sports at school. I was not athletic at all. I not like in front of people, didn't like doing anything or anything, and experience did not help me with that at all. And it wasn't until I out of uni and I was at death where I finally decided that I needed to look after my body a bit more. So I started seeing a PT. That was completely transformative for me because I realized actually what my body was of if I looked after it and fueled it and gave it some exercise and something to do. And after that, I decided to train because I thought, well, this has helped me so much. I want to help other people, the same relationship with their body, being able to use it in a way that it's really meant to be used. So I retrained PT, and then I got my strength and conditioning qualification a few years after that. Rugby, I've only started playing in sort of the last 5 years. I've always been a fan. It just wasn't available to me. Especially to girls, it was not offered. So it's taken a long time for me to be able to play, but I'm really glad I can now.
Wow. And just for clarification, when you say PT, you mean personal trainer, right?
Yes. Sorry, I realize I think in the US, you also say for physical therapist, right? Yeah. Okay. So
right. Which I think you call them physiotherapists. And that's what, yeah. I just want to clarify there, but yes. Wonderful. And I love that. So this is what I love about people. You don't have to be an athlete your whole life. Just finding that point in your life where you find the power, the strength, the joy, the fun, and the health in moving your body and having it just really, it seems like it transformed your life. And then it went another step further of now it's transformed your life because it's impacting your career, which is so cool. The power that sports.
100%. I don't know where I'd be mentally now if I hadn't gone on that physical journey. The amount of mental relief it gives me. Been absolutely amazing. So anything else, purely the mental health aspect is massive.
Right. You think you're doing it for the physical aspect sometimes, then it's no, this is for the mental aspect. This is for Yeah, my release of stress. This is for my focus, my concentration, my goal setting, my self-esteem, my confidence. And that's why like, I'm a dietitian, a sports dietitian, but so much of my work, I've become this very like empowered for female athletes specifically, just because I think that and women have been in sports now, for 50 years, but it's still something that we still need to support girls and women in sports more because of how powerful it is in our lives and how many opportunities it can open. And, it just historically sports were for men. And, it's just been in the 50 years. That's recent to say. Yeah. And, the landscape of sports in the 80s looked very different than it does now in 2025. Like you said, even rugby wasn't accessible to you, until more recently.
Yeah, I mean, and even the girl I coach now, so I do part-time rugby coaching with my local teams, and they're not offered, boys are, so it's still happening. The restriction to girls is still there. It's just slightly better than it was when I was a teenager, but it's definitely there. It's definitely still needs to be improved.
That was actually my next question, is just to kind of like talk about the sport of rugby a little bit, because like you mentioned, I'm in the US and it's not as common here. And then it, where it is really common in the UK, I believe Australia, it's very like there's plenty of places around the world where it is common. But then again, it's also might be more commonly a male dominated sport. In a similar fashion here in the US, we have American football, and yeah, girls can play football, but it's way more accessible to boys and men. It's way, so, and I think that's kind of, rugby is sort of this mix between American football and soccer. Quite confusing. They also call soccer football. So we know we're just blending all the sports together, right?
Yeah.
For our listeners, if you don't mind, maybe just like sharing a bit about the sport of rugby, like what it entails, the kind of the play, just the general setup of it.
Sure. So usually the most common version of rugby is 15s, which is 15 players aside. And I mean, the main thing of rugby is that you run forwards and pass backwards, which sounds completely counterintuitive. And when you first start playing, it kind of really is quite counterintuitive. But 40 minutes off is the sort of standard, most common playing style. And then you have sevens, which is where your Olympic team did super well with Alona Mar of how it's done, and that's 7 aside, 7 minute half and kind of in a day. That's kind of the idea of that version. And there's also rugby league, which is a slightly different rules. So it has quite a lot of variety in there. Touch leagues, if you don't want to do the contact, because when I get why people don't want to do contact. I mean, in rugby, we don't wear any pads. Right. We don't. Sometimes people might wear a scrub, but usually it's just, we call it bone on bone, which again, that sounds horrible, but it's not. And once you get the technique down, if you have good tackling and you support your body and the rest of like in strength and nutrition and make sure you're healthy, your risk of injury is pretty. And the rules on tackling are very strict, so you can't just run. You can't just races. So it's all about sort of physical game, but whilst also keeping everyone safe and making it fun.
Yeah, right. These contact sports tend to have a bit more of like again, like historically, maybe men more in those contact sports, but there's really quite a lot of rules around it to make it safe play, as you were explaining. But you still have to be willing and ready. You got to be prepared for the hit, even with the rules in place. We should be hitting at the head, but you got to be prepared for that. And that's a big deal. And then you got to be willing to do it yourself as well. And that takes quite a bit of aggression, I think is the word I'm just going to use, like to get after it like that.
Yeah, you have to be confident. You have to go into a hit and you think you're going to get hurt. So you go in 100%, you're more likely to get hurt. So you really have to just make the hit, take them down, or take the hit if you're one being tackled. Either way, you need to be ready to hit and go. Otherwise, you are far more likely to get hurt.
Yeah. And just a side note, you already mentioned Ilona Maher, who's just become quite the icon since the Olympics. And here it is, a very
much. It's unreal.
I know. I had started following her on social media because, like as I mentioned, I haven't followed rugby, but I somehow started following her on social media about 2 years prior to the Olympics and was just like, I just loved her confidence and just that duality of I can get dirty, I can hit, I can be strong, and also I'm going to wear my red lipstick. And also I want to put on this outfit that makes me feel pretty today. And I'm all of these things. And she does it with confidence. And I think that's, twofold. It's her athletic abilities that have been so impressive, but that confidence, it's confidence in life, but it translates into confidence on the field as well. In order to give it 100%, you already mentioned, if you go into it thinking you're going to get hurt, you probably will. You go into it, with that confidence, you're more likely to be in control and kind of make the right moves that prevent a careless injury. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So with her, I love she said multiple times about how, she has quite a muscly body. She's always been quite muscular. And, you have people coming after her being like, oh, you look like a man and all this ridiculousness. And I love the fact that she said that her body has given her the ability to be an elite athlete. And she's so accepting of that. And it's something that everyone should try and feel. I mean, it's hard as days where you feel like ugly or big or whatever you don't want to feel, but to be able to come out and sort of say, this has given me the ability to do the thing I love is really, really powerful, I think.
It's very powerful. And she had another video addressing her health as well, as far as BMI. Somebody attacked, saying, oh, you must have a high BMI or something like that. And she first said, why do I care what you say about my body? Just really defending that, your comments about my body mean nothing to me, which was wonderful because she was just like, look at my life. I have an Olympic medal, you don't. So my body's doing well for me. But then she also backed it up with kind of that scientific dismantling of BMI isn't appropriate, when you have a body that has so much muscle on it and strong, dense bones and things like that BMI doesn't account for. And so this number is not even a reflection of her health at all. She is followed by a strength and conditioning coach, and she has, a diet that she's proud of and a regular physical regimen. It's like, don't attack my health based on a number. You know nothing about my health. So that was another really, powerful thing of embracing, like you said, embracing her body shape and size and embracing the look of it because of what it does for her. And then also handling false health claims based on body size. So
yeah, 100%.
We're just big fans of Ilona.
Definitely.
And do you see that, if you don't mind, so the sport of rugby is high intensity. So you mentioned, the 15s has 40 minutes, but then the 7s, 7 minute, that's super quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fast, yeah. Yeah. It's a lot more running in 7s, a lot more running.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because I was going to say, in either one, the foundation of the sport is still high intensity, power, speed, strength, contact. But in the 7s, it's more running because you just got to go as fast as you can. You have very little time to accomplish what you need to.
Yes. And it's also played on the same size pit as the 15. So you have way more speed. So that's sort of part of the reason faster is because you just have and get past people, whereas 15s usually come up against someone before you get very far.
Right. Okay. And so I guess I was just thinking about from your perspective of the strength and conditioning to prepare people for that rugby, kind of what are some of the main principles that you're doing in their training to prepare them for that game?
So I always like to build a base with my athletes. So we always make sure that we obviously you build up to make sure that there's no sort of obvious gaps in it, first of all. So we look at, whether there's a particular weakness of maybe the glutes or the hamstrings or something to make sure everything's really active. Get that all switched on. We can start building into position specific training. So each position, even though most players will have general demands of rugby are the same across the game, there are specific things within each position on the pitch that is unique to that player, that position. So if you are a hooker, for example, if you're watching the game, you have a line out, the hooker will throw the line out. So you need specific positioning. You want to make sure that you've got very, very fast acting triceps, for example. Or if you are a centre, like I played, you need to be able to both sprint hard and also carry the ball through contact. You have each player has different things that are asked of them in their position. Yeah. So it's about making sure that they have all the strength, all the power positions, but also within that, so much injury prevention training. Injuries are, as you can imagine, quite common, and want to obviously prevent them as much as possible so that everyone have a season where they can stay on the pitch for the whole season. And obviously some are not preventable. Some things just happen and you just have to take it because it's a very physical game. But there are plenty of things to make sure you stay on the pitch for the whole season. And things like rupture, which is one of the most common injuries in female generally, but especially in contact sport.
Yeah, when you're at that such high intensity, giving it 100% and making these very quick movements in various different directions, and potentially getting hit from an opposing direction or something that you're not, because you're focused on moving one direction, you get hit from another direction. That's where those injuries come, just so, and they happen just like that so quickly, right? So that's where, as you're saying, your strength and conditioning is, of course, the foundation of strength for speed and power, but really looking at, are there any weaknesses? Because wherever there's a weakness, that's likely to get injured and happen, just during the game. It can just happen very quickly. So would you say those high impact injuries are more common than overuse injuries in the sport of rugby, or are you also concerned about overuse injuries as well?
I mean, injuries I tend to avoid just because if you properly balanced program and you are balancing your strength building and your recovery, so mobility exercises, keeping all your muscles nice and long and loose, those shouldn't, they won't, but shouldn't be an issue as much.
Right.
Generally, it's from the physicality of the game, especially with women. It tends to be when it's at the neck and ankles, wrists. All these joints are quite vulnerable to rupture and things like that. So concussions are really common, not necessarily because of head-on-head contact, because of a weak neck. You have the whiplash in a car crash.
Wow.
So making sure you include neck strength, and it sounds nuts, but literally 5 minutes of neck strength exercises twice a week. If you have a 1% increase in your neck strength, you reduce your risk of concussion by 5%. It's really, really super useful, but it's something that's solely avoided because you think it'll be fine. I can't be bothered. It's a bit like skipping your stretches. You think, it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, it's not worth it happening once, because a bad concussion can keep you out for ages.
Absolutely. And wow, I just learned something wonderful, Georgia. I never knew that. I feel like so much about concussion prevention is, at least here in the US, because of how popular American football is, it's just all about helmets. Wear helmets to prevent concussions. Yeah. And it's actually you can work on your neck strength, because that might reduce that whiplash effect. And that's huge. I never knew that. So that's really insightful. And yeah, quite interesting. So I was thinking about this just to kind of pull nutrition into the conversation. I tend to talk about that good foundation of nutrition. Also, just like you were saying, a foundation of a smart training plan and strength and conditioning prevents overuse injuries. And that foundation of good nutrition also can help prevent things like nutrition deficiencies, overtraining, overuse, all that, the long term, if you've got a good foundation of nutrition. But then when it comes to concussions and acute injuries, when it does happen. I'm sure you build in specific strength training to help them recover faster, just like nutrition now becomes important to help recover as well. And the kind of just to feel free to share your thought. But from my dietitian standpoint, I'm thinking, yeah, these acute injuries, you bump up anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, and protein for quick recovery. And then it really depends on that recovery timeline. If it's an ACL and that's going to take 9 months, month one of recovery, or let's say you have surgery, like month one of recovery looks very different nutrition wise than month 9 of recovery. So I think working with a dietitian to really, what are your goals during each phase of recovery is important. Sometimes after the immediate injury, you really actually need to focus on getting more nutrition in, because it's such an important time to get healing nutrients like to that area, to that site. But then understandably, if you're in month 5 of recovery and your activity, you're not training and activity has come down, you can understand that macronutrients might shift around a little bit, but it's totally different than the first 2 weeks or 6 weeks post-injury. So you really got to kind of, just like you build out your recovery plan and your strength training plan, you kind of have to build out your recovery nutrition plan as well. And then build it back up before you
100%.
return to play. Yeah.
Yes, because like you say, it requires different things. Like I would give somebody, if just posery, obviously, like you said, lots of protein to extra antioxidants and stuff. But for game, when you're playing, carbs are your friend, and will not complete minutes playing rugby if you haven't eaten a decent amount of carbs the day before, and on obviously good carbs. I'm not talking like piles of fries or whatever, but
yeah,
I think that thing is I don't like to eat carbs. I've just like they really, really don't. And they go, why? And I'm just trying to get my clients to realize that they are their friends, especially when they're saying. But yeah, it's protein for when you're recovering, 100%.
Well, and you bring up a good point. First, like why do women in general have this thing against carbs? Usually it's because that's what society has implanted in their brain. They don't need them. Yes. They're not good for them. And that's not true. There's lots of health benefits to carbohydrates and tons of performance benefits. Yeah, you're not going to get through a full day tournament, 2-hour-long practice, back, strength training every single day or whatever. Like you're not going to get through an 80-minute game without having carbohydrates to fuel you. They are your fuel for performance. And I think that athletes in the endurance world, not all, there's still room for improvement, but athletes in the endurance world generally have come to accept this because they see it, and they feel it, and they know they need them. But athletes in strength and power sports are still struggling to accept that, I think, because they are so focused on protein for recovery, protein for muscle building, or just like, oh, I'm not running a marathon. It's like, no, you're not, but you are running for 80 minutes and you are doing stop and go. And your practice is 2 hours long and you're doing it 6 days a week, and carbs fuel performance. This is what your muscles are needing. And in fact, you break it down to the like physiology of your energy systems and pathways. And actually these short sprints are using entirely glucose, ATP and glucose, entirely glucose. Whereas actually in our endurance sports, you might even burn some fat at some point, but like it is entirely glucose in short sprints. So not only do you need carbohydrates and muscle glycogen on a day-to-day, but prior to that, the whistle blowing to start the rugby game, like having some straight sugar, some sports chews, some sports beverage, or heck, like jelly beans, Skittles, whatever, like that might actually help you because you are using straight glucose for those short sprints.
Yeah, we get given, team manager brings sweets around when like the water break, because he knows that we'll start sort of crumbling if not. But I actually, I was going to go and play, and I'd had like so many issues at home. It was just I had loads of anxiety. I couldn't eat. Like I just was like looking at breakfast, like this is not going to happen. But I went and I've never felt worse in my life because I had not really eaten anything. And like my constant was out. One of the things when you have a team sport is that you need to pitch and read your team, and sort of a little bit, it was very hard to focus. I lost my power, my tackles, and I came off the pitch and I was like, I am never doing that again without eating. It was awful. So highly do not recommend.
Totally understandable though. Yeah. I know that stress and anxiety can affect people with their eating habits for sure. So it's like understandable, but then it's also sometimes when you go through it, you make that mental note and decision that, hey, if I want to play this game, I have to do it, or I have to find an easier way. You know, maybe it would have been drinking something instead of trying to eat the oatmeal, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's, you feel that difference. It's like, that's when it becomes really understandable. Food is fuel, right? And it's the physical fuel, it's the mental fuel, it's the concentration fuel. And I love that you brought up just that reminder that food helps you with your thinking and concentration and focus, and how important that is in a team sport. Like, you don't want to it's one thing to let yourself down, you know, but it's another thing when it's like, oh man, somebody was relying on me. Somebody trusted that, you know, normally I'm on it and I wasn't this time. Right. And seeing the power that food has in that regard of being a dependable teammate.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you're really putting your body on the line for your teammates. Like, that's what it feels like in a rugby game, that you're really putting your body in the way of something else so that your teammate can do their thing. And it does feel, it makes the team very, very tight. And yeah, that's exactly what it feels like if you let them down, it's the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. And hey, we all have bad days, right? But make sure that we can control the controllables, meaning eat your food, eat your carbs, get your sugar in. This is a high intensity sport. You don't want nutrition to be the limiting factor, or even just that lapse in judgment for a second that then does cause that injury. Like you said, these are acute kind of quick injuries that happen. And I think that lapse in judgment, again, injuries are going to happen in a sport like this no matter what. So I don't want you to feel like, it's your fault if it happens. There's 1,000 reasons, but yeah, if you're just not mentally like on it and in it, that lapse in judgment or quick thinking might be that difference. And yeah, to have a concussion or an ACL tear, those are two massive things that take you out for quite some time. Yes, I actually wanted to kind of get back to that concussion conversation for just a moment. Are concussions, like, are they pretty common in rugby? Because you mentioned that, there's lots of rules to try and prevent that from happening. But I would still imagine that, just like with American soccer and football, those are two pretty high concussion sports. Is that for rugby as well? Would you say it's still a risk?
Yeah, it is. And like you say, there are lots of things they try and do to prevent it. But for example, as a bit of an insight, when you join a rugby team, they'll give you a form and it asks you how many concussions have you had, not have you had any concussions. It's how many. It has massive risk for concussion, especially if your technique is not good, or particularly for tall people, because you then end up it's very hard to get low and getting into the right places and because you're kind of aiming for waist height when you're tackling is the kind of ideal height place. And actually in the community game, they've recently moved the tackle height. You used to be able to tackle like at sternum height, but for basically lower tier rugby, and now you have to aim for sort of lower ribs, belly button, in an effort to prevent concussions at that level, because it seems it's just quite high.
So yeah, my next question for you is, as a strength and conditioning coach, like, is there anything you can do? But we talked about neck exercises, but anything else you can do to kind of try to reduce the risk of concussions? And please elaborate. But what I'm hearing from you already is probably making sure that our technique, form, and our movements, like to get down and tackle in those positions, that we've got the strength and body movements to get into the correct position to do a proper hit.
Yes.
Anything else you want to expand upon of ways that you might be training somebody to kind of reduce that concussion risk?
I mean, yeah. So I have a series of like I said, neck exercises, but it's usually something static, like even just, bringing your hand to your head and then pushing your hand into your head, but not moving your head, like, and then all different sizes, all sides, sorry. And then you can do the same, but with resistance bands, like kind of wrapping them around like a bandana type thing, and you've got resistance there, or on a bench, just anything where you're putting resistance on your neck, but your neck is in a neutral position. So you don't want to be like pushing out like a chicken. It's about keeping it neutral and then applying force and being able to remain neutral in that position is the healthiest way to do it. But further on from that, yes, tackle technique, learning how to fall properly is something that I think is underestimated. Like if you get hit and you just kind of yourself flail, you're more likely to get hurt than if you are used to taking your brace and you come down in a more sort of tucked position, slightly tucked chin. You're going to fall better. You're going to be safer. There are lots of things you can train aside from like the specific skills of rugby that will help you reduce your concussion rate. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love hearing that. So fascinating. And so I was thinking about something from myself. I was a gymnast when I was younger, so lots of falling practice. And when I started trail running, not a contact sport, but just with like tripping over rocks and branches and things like that, I was falling. As a runner, I didn't fall much, but then suddenly in trail running, I was falling. And I remember the people around me in my running group and my husband at that time, boyfriend, were always so impressed that I never got hurt when I fell. And it's because I tucked and I braced and I rolled out of it, because all my years of gymnastics training and knowing how to fall and not hurt myself. Because other people would trip on a branch and they would sprain their ankle, and I would trip on a branch and I would somersault out of it, be right back up and be running again. It's just kind of, people always were laughing at me like, what the heck did you just do? And it was like, I fell, but I knew how to fall properly. So that's a really, totally different sport example, but just, there's a lot that you can teach people as you're training them and how to do that. They'll love that. So again, I just wanted to add in a little bit of my nutrition input, because when I think about nutrition for concussion, the only thing that really comes to mind from a research standpoint, besides just the fact that, hey, we're on a healing journey and we want to be mindful of nutrients and resting our body. You really need to rest your body when you have a concussion. Typically, most people have no choice because they really can't. It's like, I know it's my brain, but like, I've never had a concussion, so I'm not speaking from personal experience, but from what people tell me, it's like, I just have to lay down. I can't think. I can't keep my eyes open. Sometimes there's a wide range of severity. But anyways, it's in our brain is really heavily concentrated omega-3, specifically DHA, and typically all omega-3 fatty acids reduce inflammation. We're finding this is important in everyday life for heart health, for reducing inflammation during injury recovery. And then, the whole thing with a concussion is you have a brain injury and there can be inflammation and damage in your brain. And so there's quite a bit of research that is ongoing. So about the role of omega-3s in concussion rehabilitation and recovering from that. There's no guideline as to specific amounts, but I just want to let our listeners be aware. ALA, which is like, there's 3 different forms of omega-3s. There's ALA and then EPA and DHA, and ALA eventually can convert to EPA. DHA is the one concentrated in your brain. But the Institute of Medicine has an adequate intake for females to have ALA in amounts of 1.1 grams per day. But there's no official guideline for EPA or DHA. And just for awareness, general guidelines is that like consuming 2 servings of a fatty fish per week, or about 8 ounces per week, could get you to about 250 or 500 milligrams of combined EPA or DHA per day, which is generally considered a good amount. And again, this concussion research, we don't have guidelines to say how much to take. And so I don't want to, we can keep eating those omega-3 rich foods, but I just, on a broad platform like this, don't want to start telling people how to supplement, because we could go down a dangerous path there. But I just want to share that
for sure.
The research is right. But I do want to share that the research is saying that higher intakes of omega-3 is helpful. And most likely, unless you're eating 8 ounces of salmon every day, that will most likely come from a fish oil or an EPA DHA blended supplement. There's even some supplements out there that say, like, there's one called, this is not an advertisement for them, but there's one called Brain Armor because it's specific to the higher DHA content. So if you ever get a concussion or anything like that, those might be things you want to look into, that you actually do want to bump up your intake higher than what that current adequate intake amount is set at for everyday purposes. So I wanted to share that. When I worked with the military, there were a lot of traumatic brain injuries. And so this was how many years ago now? I'm going on nine years ago since I worked with the military. But at that time, so again, my research on this is a little outdated, but at that time when I was working with the US military, TBIs were a big area of interest in how can we help them recover faster and get back to their job and also not have any long-term issues. And we were really digging into high doses of omega-3s to help with it. And so that research can kind of translate over into concussion from sport recovery as well. So I wanted to
that's
share
really
that
interesting.
listeners.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. So let's get back to your work. So first of all, I love your website. I honestly want to play rugby now. So I love your website. It's empowering.
Good.
You are focusing specifically on training females in rugby. And it's just like, what? Yes, we need more things that are this specific. And like, so I did it. It's just like empowering. You go on your website, you love it. And you have something called your Power Pitch Protocol. Anybody, I just wanted you to like share more about it. Is it only for people local to you, like in-person training? Do you offer virtual support as well? And just tell us more about the Power Pitch Protocol.
Sure. So it's completely online. So you can do it literally anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter, because part of the joy of rugby is that it's growing in places that you never think it would grow. So I want to make it as accessible as possible. And I started it because when I started playing rugby, I sort of went online and I started to look for advice on how to, improve my strength and conditioning outside of the specific rugby training that we do on a Wednesday night or whatever. And it's all targeted for men. It was all for men. And I just found it so frustrating because I'm like, I know that there are female and male bodies are different, as we all know, but there are plenty of things that are kind of ignored when it comes to training like as a woman, hormone cycle being a really big one. So I decided to kind of take a step back and look at what was actually missing and how I could plug that gap, especially for people who, the sport is growing, and the people who are already professionals, they have all the support already. They have everything they need to be like elite athletes. But this program is for people who are kind of looking to maybe branch into professional rugby, who are maybe at grassroots level, at the moment, and are therefore kind of missing that support in the gym, around programming, around building their body up to be able to play rugby at an elite level. Because if your strength and conditioning doesn't match up with your skill level, you're never going to get where you want to be, because you won't take the hits well, you won't stay injury free or any of those things. So I wrote the Pitch Power Protocol with this in mind, and basically, to help female rugby players bridge the gap between grassroots level strength and conditioning and elite level strength and conditioning. So it's a full year program. It's 365 days, all remote. But but basically, it's a big program. But the whole point is that it gives you that full year to level up in all the different aspects of your strength and conditioning. So you get bespoke programming to fit around your schedule so that you can do it whenever you want, but also not so much that you overtrain, because something that I see a lot of is people saying, oh, well, I'll just keep training. I'll just train harder and harder and I'll be better. And then they get overuse injuries like we were talking about before. And you get frustrated because you're working so hard and it's just not doing what you want to do. You're not seeing any difference on the pitch, and you're probably picking up little niggles and injuries on the way as well. So I make sure that their training is limited to what is optimum for them, so that there isn't that chance of overuse. And then it's specifying workouts to the position that you are going to play on the pitch. As I spoke about before, each position will have some similarities, but will have some things that are unique to that position. And you get weekly check-ins with me to make sure that it's all kind of going on and going well, and you feel comfortable and you're not confused, or I don't want anyone to feel like they don't really understand what the program is. So there's always that opportunity to check in with me. We do injury prevention and rehab programming tips. So any kind of prior weaknesses you might have, we can address them and make sure that they don't become a bigger issue. Or if you do pick up an injury over the season, we can make sure that that is dealt with. Mm-hmm. We also look at the hormone cycle, because as much as everyone kind of thinks that the hormone cycle, the only bit that we need to pay attention to is when you're on your period. But actually, it's some other points, 2 other points in the cycle where you have, for example, a peak in progesterone, you are more likely to get injured. Same with peaks in estrogen, and neither of those are happening when you're actually on your period. So it's really important to kind of be able to see and be able to predict when training is going to be harder, when you're more at risk of injury, so that you can adjust your training to make sure that you're not going to be affected, either physically or mentally. And then nutritional guidance on fueling to make sure that we have the energy to play the full 80 minutes and stay injury free, and making sure we recover properly. And all of those things sort of result in a completely comprehensive training program, so that you can take your be to the next level, to whatever level you are dreaming of taking it. That is the aim of the program.
Right. Yeah, I love it. I love how comprehensive it is. I love that, you are addressing the female specific things. You add in the importance of nutrition, and then of course your specialty of the actual specific training, not just train harder, train more specifically is really what it is. Train smarter, they say. Don't train harder, train smarter, but it's really intentional and specific. Not just to the sport of rugby, but even down to the position you are playing, which is so fascinating. So I love that. Well, I hope that we will include in the show notes, your website and social media handles. So accessible at any time as well. Like if somebody today is like this, I want to start my 1-year journey today. Can they just sign up that day, or right? Is that how it works?
100%. What I would do is, if you're interested, is to find me on Instagram and drop me a message on Instagram, and I can take you through from there. That's probably the quickest and easiest way to do it, because otherwise stuff gets lost in my inbox. So it's just better to drop me a DM.
Isn't that funny how everybody's different? Sometimes I'm like, I think we communicated on Instagram DMs at first, and then I said, send me an email so I don't lose it, right? Then you're like the opposite. But there's so many ways to reach out and communicate, and so you got to find what works for you. And so I love that. So Instagram is your preferred, and then heading to your website for more information, which we'll include. What a wonderful conversation, Georgia. Thank you so much. Of course, I can't let you leave.
It's a pleasure.
I ask our final. Yeah, I can't let you leave before I ask our final rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm here. Ready?
If there's one food you could eat every single day for the rest of your life and never get sick of it, what would it be?
That's a very good question. I think probably tacos, like beef tacos.
Mm-hmm.
I could eat pretty much forever. And it's something that they do not do well in the UK. We do not do spice well in this country. But when I've been to the States, I've had some of the best food like that in my life. So yeah, happily eat tacos forever.
Well, come on down, give me a visit, because
yes,
I shared a couple months ago, my usual answer to that question was always some variation of like ice cream, coffee, chocolate. And then after living in San Antonio, Texas for the past 6 years, I've changed my mind, and I'm like, it's tacos. I eat a breakfast taco almost every day, and then we make tacos once a week as a family. We go out for tacos, and we have all the different types of tacos here, and they are amazing. So come on down.
I'm supremely jealous right now. Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you come to the States where you want to go to, but San Antonio and Austin, Texas probably have some of the best tacos. All right. So, I think California might give us a run for our money in some specific areas, but I digress. What is your favorite sport to participate in yourself?
Rugby, 100%. Best game ever. Like, it's so cathartic. If I'm ever stressed, I just need to get on the pitch and run and hit people. It really, really helps. Genuinely.
Oh, girl, I get that. I've never done contact sports like that, but sometimes when I am stressed, I'm like, this is why people have like boxing bags. Like I get it. All right. Make sure we get that outlet out in sport in a structured environment. It's a wonderful,
yes, where it's safe,
cathartic release. Yeah. Where it's safe and appropriate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how about as a spectator? Is it the same? What's your favorite sport to watch and cheer on as a fan?
I mean, yeah, probably rugby again. Although at the Olympics, I really love watching gymnastics. I think it's just an unbelievable athletic feat. Like Simone Biles, what a queen. Just love her. So I think, yeah, either rugby or gymnastics, which is so different, but yeah, they're both excellent.
Yeah, but still, impressive is the word for both of them. Yeah.
Mm.
And a hard one, but if there's a female athlete out there that you want to give a shout out to for being a role model, inspiration for any reason whatsoever, who would that be and why?
It's a really good question. It's good. So I'm going to say Sarah Byrne. She is a rugby player who plays for the Bristol Bears. So she's actually currently a teammate of Ilona Maher over in the PWR here. And I watched her play a few times, and she's a forward who also runs really hard. She's a really dynamic player, and she's so nice. I met her once and completely fangirled. Like, I was going to be all cool, like, hi, yeah, I really like. And I was just like, oh my God, love you. Can I get a picture? It's so embarrassing. But yeah, I think Sarah Byrne of the Bristol Bears, love her. She's excellent.
Amazing. Shout out to Sarah and to you, Georgia. Thank you for sharing your knowledge on this podcast, helping female athletes train harder, smarter, fuel better, and guiding them to allowing the sport of rugby change their lives just as it has for you. And excited to see how many more lives are positively impacted through your work. Thank you so much for joining our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a total pleasure. Yeah, it's been amazing.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, I would truly appreciate if you could share this episode with a friend, give us a 5-star rating, or even leave a comment and a review. It really helps boost engagement and searchability and get episodes like this into the ears of people who will benefit from improving their nutrition and getting help. If you yourself are looking for more resources and help, you can head to riseupnutritionrun.com to learn about all my services and offerings. You can also find more resources at femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com, where we have all the resources surrounding this podcast. Both of those links are included in the show notes. There, you will also find ways to support this podcast. You can support the podcast with a financial contribution, link in the show notes and on the websites. And you can find ways to get in touch with me. If you are looking for help with your personal nutrition, you can head to my website and get in contact with me, and we can talk about applying for nutrition coaching help. Perhaps you are looking to be a guest on the podcast. You can head to femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com and submit a form to be a guest on this show or recommend somebody else. I also have discount codes and links to different products and companies and resources and free downloadable handouts within the websites that are always evolving and being updated. So please check them out. Many of these companies and products I do occasionally talk about on the show, but they're listed on the websites as their forever home that you can easily access when you're looking for help. Thank you so much for being a fan. Please reach out if you need help, and I'll see you in the next episode.